The northwestern part of present-day Burkina Faso was populated by hunter-gatherers from 14,000 BC to 5000 BC. Their tools, including scrapers, chisels, and arrowheads, were discovered in 1973 through archaeological excavations. Agricultural settlements were established between 3600 and 2600 BC. The Bura culture was an Iron Age civilization centered in the southwestern portion of modern-day Niger and in the southeastern part of contemporary Burkina Faso. The iron industry and smelting and forging for tools and weapons had developed in sub-Saharan Africa by 1200 BC. To date, the oldest evidence of iron smelting found in Burkina Faso dates from 800 to 700 BC and forms part of the ancient Pharos Metallurgy World Heritage Site. From the 3rd to the 13th centuries CE, the Iron Age Bura culture existed in the territory of present-day southeastern Burkina Faso and southwestern Niger. Various ethnic groups in present-day Burkina Faso, such as the Mossi, Fula, and Diola, arrived in successive waves between the 8th and 15th centuries. From the 11th century, the Mossi people established several separate kingdoms. There is debate about the exact dates when Burkina Faso's many ethnic groups arrived to the area. The Proto-Mossi arrived in the far eastern part of what is today Burkina Faso sometime between the 8th and 11th centuries. They accepted Islam as their religion in the 11th century. The Samo arrived around the 15th century. The Dogon lived in Burkina Faso's north and northwest regions until sometime in the 15th or 16th centuries, and many of the other ethnic groups that make up the country's population arrived in the region during this time. During the Middle Ages, the Mossi established several separate kingdoms, including those of Tenkodogo, Yatenga, Zamboma, and Ouagadougou, which is the modern-day capital. Sometime between 1326 and 1338, Mossi warriors raided Timbuktu, but the Mossi were defeated at the Battle of Kobe and Mali in 1483. During the early 16th century, the Songhai conducted many slave raids into what is today Burkina Faso. During the 18th century, the Gurko Empire was established at Bobo Dioulasso, and ethnic groups such as the Dion, Lobi, and Birifur settled along the Black Volta. Starting in the early 1890s, during the European scramble for Africa, a series of European military officers made attempts to claim parts of what is today Burkina Faso. At times, these colonialists and their armies fought the local peoples. At times, they forged alliances with them and made treaties. The colonialist officers and their home governments also made treaties among themselves. The territory of Burkina Faso was invaded by France, becoming a French protector in 1896. The eastern and western regions were a standoff against the forces of a powerful ruler, Samori Toure. Complicated the situation, came under French occupation in 1897. By 1898, the majority of the territory corresponding to Burkina Faso was nominally conquered. However, French control of many parts remained uncertain. The Franco-British Convention of June 14, 1898 created the country's modern borders. In the French War, a war of conquest against local communities and political powers continued for about 5 years. In 1904, the largely pacified territories of the Volta Basin were integrated into the Upper Senegal and Niger colony of French West Africa as part of the reorganization of the French West African colonial empires. The colony had its capital in Bamako. The language of colonial administration and schooling became French. The public education system started from humble origins. Advanced education was provided for many years during the colonial period in Dakar. Draftees from the territory participated in the European fronts of World War I and the battalions of the Senegalese Rifles. Between 1915 and 1916, the dialects in the western part of what is now Burkina Faso and the bordering eastern fringe of Mali became the state of one of the most important armed oppositions to colonial governments, the Volta Boni War. The French government finally suppressed the movement, but only after suffering defeats. It also had to organize the largest expeditionary force of its colonial history to send into the country to suppress the insurrection. Armed opposition racked the Sahelian north when the Tuareg and allied groups of the Dori region ended their truce with the government. The capital Ouagadougou in 1930 French Upper Volta was established on March 1, 1919. The French feared a resurgence of armed uprising and had related economic considerations. To bolster its administration, the colonial government separated from present-day territory of Burkina Faso from Upper Senegal and Niger. The new colony was named Haute-Volta for its location on the upper course of the Volta River. Hessling initiated an ambitious road-making program to improve infrastructure and promoted the growth of cotton for export. The cotton policy, based on coercion, failed, and revenue generated by the colony stagnated. The colony was dismantled on September 5, 1932, being split between the French colonies of Ivory Coast, French Sudan, and Niger. Ivory Coast received the largest share, which contained most of the population, as well as the cities of Ouagadougou and Bobo-Dioulasso. The French reversed this trend during the period of intense anti-colonial agitation that followed the end of World War II. On September 4, 1947, it revived the colony of Upper Volta, with its previous boundaries as a part of the French Union. The French designated its colonies as departments of metropolitan France on the European continent. On December 11, 1958, the colony achieved self-government as the Republic of Upper Volta. It joined the Franco-African Community. A revision in the organization of French overseas territories had begun with the passage of the Basic Law of July 23, 1956. This act was followed by reorganization measures approved by the French Parliament early in 1957 to ensure a large degree of self-government for individual territories. Upper Volta became an autonomous republic in the French community on December 11, 1958. Full independence from France was received in 1960. The Republic of Upper Volta was established on December 11, 1958 as a self-governing colony within the French community. The name Upper Volta related to the nation's location along the upper reaches of the Volta River. The river's three tributaries are called the Black, White, and Red Volta. These were expressed in the three colors of the former national flag. Before attaining autonomy, it had been French Upper Volta and part of the French Union. On August 5, 1960, it attained full independence from France. The 1960 Constitution provided for election by universal suffrage of a president and a National Assembly for 5-year terms. Soon after coming to power, the president banned all political parties other than the UDV. The government lasted until 1966. After much unrest, including mass demonstrations and strikes by students, labor unions, and civil servants, the military intervened. The 1966 military coup deposed the president, suspended the Constitution, dissolved the National Assembly, and put a new person at the head of the government for senior army officers. The army remained in power for 4 years. On June 14, 1976, the Voltans ratified a new constitution that established a 4-year transition period towards complete civilian rule. The new president remained in power throughout the 70s as president of military or mixed civil-military governments. The president's rule coincided with the beginning of the Sahel drought and famine, which had a devastating impact on Upper Volta and neighboring countries. After conflict over the 1976 Constitution, a new constitution was written and approved in 1977. The government faced problems with the country's traditionally powerful trade unions. And on November 25, 1980, the government was overthrown, and the new colonel established a military committee of recovery for national progress as a supreme governmental authority, thus eradicating the 1977 Constitution. The coup brought the president to power, and his government began to implement a series of revolutionary programs, which included mass vaccinations, infrastructure improvements, the expansion of women's rights, encouragement of domestic agricultural consumption, and anti-desertification projects. On August 2, 1984, on the president's initiative, the country named changed from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, or Land of the Honest Men. The presidential decree was confirmed by the National Assembly on August 4, 1984. Weirdly enough, this is pretty much it for the history of Burkina Faso, since everything else is mainly just elections and coups. But these aren't unique to Burkina Faso and will likely be brushed on more in the countries surrounding Burkina Faso and their videos, like Mali and Niger. That is it for the history of Burkina Faso. Now time for the stats. The area is about 274,000 square kilometers. The population is roughly 23.5 million. The GDP is about 20.5 billion US dollars. And the GDP per capita is just under 1,000. I'll see y'all next time for the history of Burkina.